Now we have another peculiarity of our narration, inasmuch as it contains a considerable amount of double talk. This double talk seems to bear upon another incident or another circumstance which much earlier created a very broad stir and a considerable scandal in the United States. About the year 1827, a Captain William Morgan, for reasons perhaps best known to Captain Morgan, unless we wish to believe the explanation given in the book Etidorhpa, attempted to prepare and cause to be published a complete expose of the rites, rituals, and ceremonies of Freemasonry. This Captain William Morgan was himself apparently obligated by Masonic obligations, and he broke these obligations and prepared this expose, which was not only printed later, but passed through many editions, and these later printings apparently did not cause any perpetuation of the original tragedy. In 1827, we have to realize that life in the United States was considerably different from what it is today. It was a time in which feelings on many subjects ran very high, and there was in this country quite a marked division between pro-Masonic and anti-Masonic feeling. This feeling ran deep, largely probably due to propaganda and to a number of very vicious misrepresentations which appeared in the press and took on political coloring at about that time and somewhat earlier. Involvement of certain European secret societies in Bavaria and other regions had caused people to be afraid that secret societies were attempting to undermine the political future of the United States. Even at one time, George Washington suffered from fear in this direction. Actually, also, the situation among the people religiously was a little different from what it is now. Although Freemasonry has never been advanced as a religious organization, there can be no doubt that its principles have exercised a broad religious influence upon a great many people. This influence has been consistently constructive, but in a day when it was very important only to consider the name of the religion or the sect to which you belong, and you are not religious unless you belong to the prevailing faith of your community, and that you would be subject to being bitterly persecuted even if you belong to an unpopular sect. With these considerations, we can see why what was termed the unorthodoxy of Masonic idealistic thinking might have been a rather serious problem in the lives of small merchants and farmers and individuals with comparatively slight contact with the larger problems of comparative religion, most of which they had never heard of. In any event, the work by Captain Morgan brought down upon him some kind of a retaliation which could well have been rather dramatic in the day in which he lived. He was warned, he was pled with, he was begged not to go on with his project because of the fact that it would incense a great many people and at the same time accomplish no tangible good of any kind, inasmuch as there was really nothing to expose. There was nothing involved which could have the slightest political significance or have the slightest effect upon the fate of the nation or any other broad issue. But if we are to carry the concept carried in this book, the idea became more or less of an obsession. This man was convinced that he was born for the purpose of revealing secrets. And even though after he revealed them they caused no particular stir and no excitement to speak of, he felt that he simply had to reveal them. Now, he's not alone in this type of thing. Practically every secret society, benevolent or otherwise, has been exposed many times. And for the most part, everyone has been a little angry at the person who broke his obligations, but for the most part there's been no serious tragedies or anything of an exceptionally outstanding nature. But due to the general prevailing temper, which is the same kind of temper which resulted in the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, the Mormon leader who was assassinated for having created a new faith in America, or the assassination or execution of John Brown at Harper's Ferry, these kind of feelings were running strong in those days, and these comparatively illiberal people felt that the slightest deviation from tradition was a hideous offense which must be appropriately punished. The story is that after the preparation of his expose, Captain Morgan, an effort was made to spirit him into Canada. He was abducted, and according to final belief, he had rocks tied around his body, and he was thrown into the Niagara River near Lake Ontario, and therefore died by assassination or by murder, if you wish to come out and call it such. Later, his body was identified, at least in part, and the anti-Masonic group at that time made a tremendous furor over the whole thing. Now, this seems to have been a more or less closed issue. Everyone gradually forgot about it. No one knew too much about it to begin with. Facts were few and opinions were many and gossip was continuous. But what really happened seems to have been rather mysterious. There was no real certainty, apart from very largely perjured testimony, that anything of a particularly unpleasant nature actually happened to Morgan. Maybe something did, maybe something didn't. Those who wanted to believe it were always able to manufacture a story. But everything had died down long before the basic information contained in the book Etidorhpa had any interest to anyone. But with the publication of the book, the entire subject took on a very interesting and dramatic coloring. And in connection with this, I can only mention that it is rather clearly keyed in the text, became one of the great centers of controversy in all the publicity, book reviews, and other matters relating to Etidorhpa at the time of the publication of the book itself, and has been a lingering concept ever since, and that according to Mr. Knapp, he was convinced that Mr. Lloyd actually believed that the true author of Etidorhpa was Captain William Morgan. That this book was written many years after the supposed death of Captain Morgan. Mr. Knapp, who made the various portraitures contained in the book, was unable at the time he made the pictures to secure a photograph or a likeness or a picture of Morgan, because as might be expected, they were rather rare, because even the daguerreotype was not available. But later, he was able to find an old picture, and he says that to his utter astonishment, the face of the mysterious man in Etidorhpa was identically the face of Captain William Morgan. If this account has any weight, it adds the second link to our mysterious chain of events, because it would explain the opening part of the book and would intimate that the so-called murder of Captain Morgan did not occur, but that Morgan was placed under a penalty, and that this penalty became the subject of the book Etidorhpa. Now, as we go into the book itself, as many people realize, we have throughout its text occasional direct references to Masonic rituals and symbols. There are several places in which statements are made that are obviously derived directly from ritual. Therefore, there is every implication in the book that the original author or authors wished it to be considered as having Masonic significance. Of this there can be no doubt. Just at what degree this Masonic significance is valid is again one of the mysteries surrounding Etidorhpa. The book goes into considerable detail, as we will later notice, relating to the so-called abduction of a man at a time and under circumstances would make it appear almost certain that Captain William Morgan is intended. We now pass into an entirely new sphere. The abduction of Morgan, the circumstances involving the possibility that he survived and that he remained hidden for one reason or another for a long period of time, such ideas, such circumstances, do not necessarily tax our imagination to any overwhelming degree.